Before borders, before governments, before laws that claimed ownership of land, there were nations already here. They were not discovered, they were displaced. They were not lost, they were erased. But their blood remembers. And today, science is searching for what history tried to destroy. This is the story of identity. This is the story of survival. This is the story of Native America. In America, identity became paperwork. Names written in ledgers, blood measured in fractions, existence recorded or erased by law. For Native peoples, survival was no longer only about living, it was about proving you existed at all. By the late 1800s, the United States government forced many Native nations onto reservations, confined lands far from ancestral homes. These were not gifts of land, they were boundaries of control. Tribes that once moved freely across vast territories were restricted to small, often barren spaces. Traditional ways of life collapsed, hunting routes disappeared, sacred sites were lost, economies were destroyed. Identity, once tied to land, became disconnected from place, and without land, culture struggled to survive. Old treaties, burning documents, signatures. Hundreds of treaties were signed between Native nations and the U.S. government. Many were broken. Land guaranteed in writing was later taken. Rights promised were denied. Sovereignty was repeatedly violated. For Native communities, treaties became symbols of betrayal, proof that survival required constant resistance. Trust was replaced by caution. Identity became political. Battlefield imagery, smoke, silence after violence. Throughout the 18th and 19th centuries, Native nations fought to defend their lands and people. These conflicts were not simply wars, they were struggles for existence. Entire villages were destroyed, communities displaced, populations shattered. Violence was not an accident of expansion. For many, it was policy. And with every loss, identity became more fragile, yet more fiercely defended. Maps dividing land into parcels. In 1887, a new policy attempted to reshape Native life completely. Communal tribal lands were divided into individual plots assigned to Native families. Land that remained was sold to non-Native settlers. The goal was assimilation. The result was devastation. Tribal unity weakened, communal identity fractured, millions of acres were lost. Identity was no longer collective, it was individualized and controlled. Native families adopting Western clothing, abandoning traditions. Government policy demanded transformation. Native peoples were encouraged and often forced to abandon their traditions. Spiritual ceremonies were outlawed, traditional governance dismantled, cultural expression suppressed. The message was clear: to survive, you must become someone else. But identity does not disappear so easily. It hides, it adapts, it waits. In the 1930s, federal policy shifted. Some tribal governments were restored, certain cultural practices allowed, but recognition came with conditions. Tribes were required to adopt government-approved structures and constitutions. Identity remained regulated, shaped by external authority. Even recognition came with termination and erasure, 1950s through 1960s. In the mid-20th century, a new policy emerged: termination. The government sought to end federal recognition of many tribes entirely. Recognition removed, land rights dissolved, communities scattered. Thousands of Native individuals were relocated to cities under promises of opportunity. Instead, many faced poverty, discrimination, and cultural isolation. Identity, once rooted in community, became fragmented in unfamiliar worlds. Urban displacement and loss. In urban environments, many Native individuals struggle to maintain connection with their heritage. Languages faded, ceremonies became difficult to practice, generations grew up disconnected from tradition. Some lost knowledge of their tribal origins entirely. Identity became a question rather than a certainty. The Red Power movement. By the late 1960s and early 1970s, Native communities organized. They demanded recognition, sovereignty, and justice. They occupied land, they protested broken treaties, they reclaimed their voice. Identity was no longer something to defend quietly. It became a declaration. We are still here. Legal battles for existence. Recognition increasingly depended on legal evidence. Tribes had to prove continuous existence as distinct communities. They submitted genealogical records, historical documents, cultural evidence, oral histories, sometimes even genetic research. The burden of proof rested on those whose histories had been systematically erased. The rise of DNA testing. By the late 20th century, genetic science introduced new possibilities. DNA testing promised objective evidence of ancestry. For some, it seemed like a path to recognition, a scientific confirmation of identity, a way to restore what history had taken. But reality was more complicated. Limits of scientific proof. Genetic tests cannot identify specific tribal affiliation. They compare DNA to reference populations, often incomplete or limited. Many Native communities are not represented in genetic databases. Science cannot fully capture cultural belonging. Identity is more than genetic markers. It is language, tradition, kinship, and shared experience. Controversy and conflict. The use of DNA in determining Native identity created tension. Some saw it as helpful evidence. Others viewed it as another form of external control. Could a laboratory define what community defines? Could belonging be reduced to biology? For many tribes, the answer was clear. Identity cannot be extracted from blood alone. The pain of proving heritage. Many individuals seeking recognition face overwhelming challenges. Historical records are incomplete. Family histories were disrupted by forced assimilation. Names were changed. Generations separated by policy struggle to reconnect. To prove who they are, they must reconstruct what history shattered. Missing and unrecorded lives. Countless Native lives were never recorded. Entire communities disappeared from official history. Unmarked graves, lost records, silenced stories. Without documentation, recognition becomes nearly impossible. Absence becomes evidence of erasure. DNA and historical trauma. Modern research explores how historical trauma affects generations. The impact of violence, displacement, and cultural suppression can influence health, memory, and identity. For Native communities, history lives in the present. The past is not past, it is inherited. Sovereignty and self-definition. Despite centuries of control, Native nations maintain a fundamental principle. They define their own identity. Tribal membership is determined by community, lineage, and cultural connection, not external authority. Sovereignty includes the right to say who belongs. Identity is not granted, it is lived. Continuing struggle. Today, many tribes remain unrecognized. They continue to petition the federal government, sometimes for decades. They gather evidence. They submit documentation. They fight for acknowledgement. Recognition is not just symbolic, it determines survival. The weight of history. Every generation carries the weight of what came before, the loss of land. Today, Native identity exists in many worlds at once. Some live on ancestral lands. Some grow up in cities. Some reconnect later in life. Some search their entire lives for answers. Modern Native identity is complex, shaped by history, displacement, resilience, and renewal. But the question of recognition remains. Who is Native? Who decides?